Well, today we have I always say a fun one, but really this is just a great one. I've been looking forward to doing for some time. Today we have none other than the gentleman that played Jeff, Donna Reed's son on the Donna Reed Show, as well as so many other things I can't wait to talk to him about. But it's Paul Petersen. Paul, thanks for being on.
Well, John, it's my pleasure. I'm glad to be here at last. It took us a little while to hook up, but here we are.
It did, but that's okay. Yeah, like I said, I always tell my subscribers, hey, sometimes people have things are going on in their life. Just I'm working on it, so we're good, but we're here. So, Paul, I'll tell you what, right out of the gates, do you remember the first time that you met Donna Reed?
Oh, I most certainly do. Sure. It was really quite a big deal because we had tests before they did the pilot. And there were two sets of brother sisters. That was me and Shelley Fabares and another couple.
Mm-hmm.
And then there were like four potential Dr. Stones. So on this particular test day, they ran the Dr. Stones in and out and ran the children in and out. Donna was an Iowa farm girl. And that's my family, all from Iowa, the adjacent county. We were in Cherokee and she was in Crawford.
Wow.
So it was a big deal to meet an Academy Award winning actress.
Yeah.
And right from the beginning, though, I called her mom because in the script, she wasn't Donna, she was mom.
Wow.
And that's the way we met. But I certainly do remember it was a big deal.
And what was your very first impression of her?
Well, she was a lot like the good-looking women in my family. I mean, I had a lot of cousins and aunts and uncles, and she said fur and git, we talk like Iowa kids. And the big meeting that stands out even more than the first meeting was when we were all signed and hired to do the pilot. Because on that day, my grandfather, Grandpa Berg, insisted on taking me to the studio. He was to be my guardian that day. And the reason was actually pretty funny when I think back on it. Now, mind you, this is in the summer of 1958.
Sure.
Grandpa Burr walked right up to Donna Reed, big star, the star of our show, and he said to her, "Donna Bell Mullinger, I know your dad," because that was Donna's real name, Mullinger. And people in Iowa called her Donna Bell, always.
Oh my gosh.
And that was my grandpa. He wanted her to know that he was a neighbor.
Did he know the family?
Oh, yes, indeed. When I say adjacent counties, we're talking northwest Iowa, beginning with Ames and then right to the river. And that's where we were from. And adjacent counties, we're talking like this.
Wow.
There's not really big towns.
Very interesting. Very interesting. So did you know,
Yeah, it was.
you were obviously, younger at that time. Did you realize like this is the woman that, played Jimmy Stewart's wife on It's a Wonderful Life? I mean, did you have a sense of that?
Indeed, we did, because Don Reed, an Academy Award winner from Here to Eternity, was a big deal, and it was like a heaven sent job. Now you never know when you get a job like this how long it's going to last. In fact, most actors will tell you, John, you never look past the pilot episode.
Mm-hmm.
Because after you finish the pilot, you got to wait for the sponsors and the network to give you the go ahead. And if they give you a go ahead, usually it's for like 13 episodes. So maybe you know what you do for the next 13 weeks. But in our case, the sponsor involved was Campbell Soup. Campbell Soup only had one other show on ABC. It was called Lassie.
Sure.
So when they made a commitment, it was pretty secure. And I'm glad they did, because our initial ratings were terrible. They had put us on Tuesday nights at 10 o'clock.
Oh,
10 o'clock.
oh,
And who watches family shows at 10 o'clock? And it was the wife of the Campbell Soup CEO who said to her husband, "You aren't being fair to them. Put them on in a better spot." And they moved the show from 10 o'clock on a Tuesday to Thursday night at 8 o'clock, right after Ozzie and Harriet. And there we stayed for the next 8 years. But it was the wife of the CEO that made the decision.
I love that. I love
Isn't
that.
that a great story?
It is a great story. And I mean, it
Yeah,
ran, am I right? I heard, I think I got this right. 275 episodes you were in?
that's right. The number we use is 276. That's correct. And when we did, excuse me, along with Donna Reed's youngest daughter, Mary Owen.
Mhm.
Remember, Donna was married to our producer, Tony Owen. Mary Owen and I did a scrapbook of the Donna Reed Show, and we went back through the archives at the Donna Reed Foundation, going through the episodes and seeing the guest stars. It was a great exercise. In fact, I recommend the scrapbook to anybody.
Oh, I'd love it. Well, tell me, shoot, I'm curious. Who were your favorite guest stars that were on?
Well, we had a lot. The last guest star was Leslie Gore from the last show. Well, we had Buster Keaton,
Oh,
Esther Williams. We had some great guest stars. Well, in the sports world, we had Willie Mays, um, Don Drysdale.
oh,
We had the Los Angeles Rams. Pretty cool.
oh,
The
very.
quarterback then was Billy Wade, but my hero was our linebacker, Les Richter. And he was a tough guy. Oh, man. And the reason that was important is because Les got the job as the director for the Riverside Racecourse, which is where I, being a car guy, loved to go. And he was always so generous to make sure we had pit passes and all the rest. So it
Wow.
was fun. I mean, you never really knew who was going to walk over on stage one.
That's so cool. Okay, look, I'm a huge Buster Keaton fan, so I need to
Oh,
know, what was he like? What do you remember about the man?
I remember him vividly, and I'm going to take the time, John, to share the story.
I'd love it.
First of all, for industry professionals, Buster Keaton is a giant, not a run of the mill celebrity. He was a giant,
Mhm.
and when he was brought in for our first Christmas episode, it was to play a janitor at the hospital where Dr. Alexander Stone worked. And what they did was they created a basement office for him. And our cinematographer rolled this big 35 millimeter B. Mitchell camera up to the fourth wall, put in 1,000 feet of film, which is about 9 minutes, and we all stood back behind the camera. And Gert Anderson, our cinematographer, said, "You ready?" And Buster Keaton said, "Yep." And he flipped the switch on, and we were there for the next 9 minutes while Buster Keaton did everything. Fell off ladders, put them up, built a toy. He was busy. Now, what made this dramatic? Word had gotten out throughout Columbia Pictures. This is 20 sound stages, lots of famous shows. The performers from those other shows all drifted up to stage one, and the executives all came down from the executive suites to stand there and just watch. Wow,
Wow.
that's what I remember. It
Oh,
was
wow.
uh, Donna Reed said, "You're looking at a giant," and it was true. Now, mind you, I was not a a kid that would be prone to hero worship. Obviously, I knew Buster Keaton because Saturday morning cartoons, there would be Buster Keaton, you get to see him. But I had worked with Cary Grant and Sophia Loren on big movies, but there was nothing like this because this was a universal respect from craft service to the property master to the teamsters to the guys in the carpentry shop. Everybody came to watch this. It was respect. That's what it was.
Paul, I got to tell you, I've had this happen on different interviews, but you just sent like just goosebumps throughout my whole body. That was really something. I would have given anything to have been there. I'm with you. The man was, as you said, a giant. He was a genius. They never gave, he did get his due in later life, luckily.
Yes.
But
in later life.
Exactly. But the way that they ended up treating him once they sold his contract to MGM or whatever, it was just terrible. But he was just amazing. He was doing commercials. He was incredible. I mean,
yeah.
Wow.
When I was so fortunate, Columbia Pictures got started in the 30s. This was Harry Cohen's baby.
Sure.
And there was a mix of people on the lot at any given time. They'd be doing High Noon with Gary Cooper. And on the next stage was the Three Stooges.
Wow.
So the casts and crews, starting in the morning, we all got together in the makeup department, and then you went down to your various stages. But at lunchtime, you were together and you talked and visited. And the people I worked with had helped invent show business. Our gaffer, George Hager, was in his 80s, and he came back to work, having retired, because he loved Donna Reed. He'd worked with D.W. Griffith, for goodness sakes.
Oh, my God.
Cecil B. DeMille. I mean, that's how big the experience level was of the crew. I'll give you an idea. Our costumer, wardrobe, left the Donna Reed Show to go do a little project down the street called Star Trek. Guy Verriel was an Emmy-winning costumer. Gerd Anderson, when he left the Donna Reed Show, which, remember, was a black and white family sitcom, his next job was to be the cinematographer of, now I'm going to forget the name of the show. Oh, with Barbara Bain and Martin Landau.
Oh, Mission Impossible.
Thank you. Mission Impossible, which was brilliant and gorgeously photographed. So we were working with the best that the business had to offer.
What other shows or movies, for that matter, that you had access to or were shooting on the lot at that time that you recall either visiting or seeing or any of that?
I saw them all. I mean, just off the top of my head, don't forget, Dennis the Menace was there, Farmer's Daughter, Hazel, the movie Bye Bye Birdie, Janet Leigh and Anne Margaret in the makeup room, 7 a.m. And of course, I was allowed to go everywhere. Once Billy Gray left with the Father Knows Best cast, I was the little guy on the lot except for Jay North. And I was allowed everywhere. And Harry Cohen himself made it plain, one and all, this is my kid. And what he meant was I had been hired to do a Ford theater called Black Jim Hawk. And Harry Cohen and a couple of suits came to the set at the Columbia Ranch. And it was an evening shoot, so it was getting dark. And I played a boy looking through bars at the execution of my father.
Oof.
That was the scene. I knew what I was doing. And I did the dialogue, and tears came out the whole bit. And when the director said cut, well, I became Paul. And as I walked off behind the camera, Gary Coleman himself looked at me and said, "That was a good job, kid. I believed you." And I looked him right in the eye and said, "That's what you paid me for."
Oh.
See, to me, don't let anybody catch you at it.
Mm-hmm.
It shouldn't seem like acting. It should be real. And getting to work with Cary Grant and then Donna Reed, I learned to respect that. Donna would remind me over and over, listen, pay attention to the people you're in the scene with, which is a good dose of reality,
Mm-hmm.
because what you hear is translated to your face. If you're interested,
Mm-hmm.
if you're surprised, if you're enamored, it all ought to show. And you watch Donna Reed in movies going back to It's a Wonderful Life, to From Here to Eternity. She listened. She learned her craft there at MGM.
Mm-hmm.
So we had some pretty good people.
You had some great people. You know, it's funny that you say that about Donna Reed too, because if you look at any of her movies, whether it be It's a Wonderful Life, From Here to Eternity, so many moments that camera moves right in, and it's like right here on her.
Yes,
And you can see the water that wells up in her eyes. She isn't even talking.
that's right.
And there is so much happening. That's what she just draws you in. You feel the vulnerability. It's just amazing.
Absolutely. And there would be moments during the show when we as a crew, as the cast, were mesmerized. She wasn't even issuing dialogue. You're just watching her face. For example, if anybody, you should do this. When we did the scene with Shelley Fabares singing Johnny Angel,
Yeah.
she didn't have to say a word. It was all on her face. Just fantastic. She did the same with me when I sang My Dad to Carl Betz.
Yep.
Now, let me remind you about Carl Betz. Remember, he went on with Judd for the Defense to win an Emmy.
Wow.
Guy was a pretty good actor.
He was.
And well, he should be. He graduated with the Carnegie Award from Carnegie Mellon University.
Uh,
But he had to share the award with a pretty well-known writer named Robert Ludlum.
oh,
Carl and Robert shared and stayed friends all their lives.
oh, what a
So
small world.
that was the level of professionalism and expertise and experience that we lived with. The man who wrote the pilot for the Donna Reed Show was the same man who wrote The Magnificent Seven,
Oh, one of my
Bill
favorites.
Roberts. Well, it should be everybody's favorite. And even though it was derived from the Japanese film, Robert, he gave it something extra.
Mhm.
And those kind of people were walking around the lot all the time. Pretty
Well,
amazing.
yeah, what it's amazing. I mean, I am so envious of that where you were. It's just incredible. But what was a lot of times when I interview people, the audience is curious. Like, what was a typical day on the set like for you? Like when you arrived at the studio, is it like you were walking by these sets, seeing all these people? What was a typical day like for you?
Well, the day is, it's really hard to explain this unless you're familiar with the workings of a studio.
Mhm.
When I got my call, and I didn't need very much makeup, it was to go to makeup department. Well, that was in the day. It was first run by Clay Campbell and then Benny Lane. These are Academy Award winning makeup artists.
Oh.
And there would be the other cast members from around the lot. But there was a sense of discipline and professionalism, you were expected to know your work. You didn't show up drunk. You certainly didn't use any drugs. You were there to do your best work in front of other professionals who were doing their best work. That's the way it was. I always felt, and this is at the coaching from Donna Reed and Carl Betz and our string of directors was so nourishing. I never felt out of place. I never got in a scene with someone I felt overmatched. I was there to do a job. And as fate would have it, and I think my credits prove, I was pretty good at it.
You were.
And I loved working with Cary Grant, who was a gigantic star. I mean, but working with him, it was a lesson in itself, because even though he was working with an 11-year-old boy, he wanted to make sure I understood the purpose of the scene. And if you see the movie Houseboat, you can see it's there. There it is. And I listened and performed, and we stayed friends until his death in 1986.
In Iowa.
I called him Mr. G. I had enormous respect for him, and he had respect for all the people he worked with. And it was a great feeling.
Yeah, I mean, he's another giant, and is natural. He made it look so natural. But what I did read that you were close with him right up until he passed on.
Yes, indeed.
I believe it was a stroke in Iowa, but
yes, in 1986. You know, I'll give you an idea, and this may not sound like a big deal, but he came to one of my weddings, and he brought along a gal that nobody knew he was dating, Diane Cannon.
Yep.
And he was so charming. Gosh, my mom, I mean, her knees would buckle when he got around him. And I get it, I understand. But in my life, I've been exposed to some pretty large personalities.
Mm-hmm.
And in the end of the day, I tell this to people, there were really only two that took my breath away. One was a chance encounter at the Directors Guild. I was backing down the aisle to see the premiere of, what was it called? The Rat Pack or some show like that,
Yeah.
And I bumped into a person, and I turned around to apologize, and I'm looking right at Elizabeth Taylor.
Oh.
And I'm this far away. And my friend, Daryl Richard, who was with me, had to actually catch me because I fainted and prop me up. My God, there was Elizabeth Taylor.
Wow.
The only other person that happened to me with was at the nightclub. I'm going to forget the name of it. I'm sorry, but I'm getting old here at 78.
It's okay. Where was it? New York or here?
No. In Hollywood on Melrose. Then, huh?
Was it Serra?
No, it was like a comedy club, but for improv. The improv. Gee, yeah. Thanks, Paul.
We got it, Paul.
And I was in the outer room, and my friend Sis Rundle, she was the head cheerleader for the LA Rams, ran over to me and grabbed my elbow. Now, she knew about the people I admired in the sports world, and said, come with me. And she walked me through this crowd to like a picnic table and said, Paul, this is Reggie Jackson. And again, my knees just turned to water. Those are the only two people that I've really been dumbstruck.
Wow.
The rest, you know, kings and queens, and I do mean royal family and people who should have intimidated me but didn't. I mean, I admired them. I was aware of their work, but I wasn't speechless getting to work with Henry Fonda.
Mm-hmm.
I admired him.
What was he like?
He was wonderful. Don Petersen had asked me to come play kind of a challenging part, a young a convict who had just gotten out of prison who was dating Henry Fonda's daughter. Okay, so it was, now mind you, it's supposed to be a family show. And I brought an edge to the part that the people who were watching after one take kind of thought was a little too much. And Don Petersen stepped around the camera and said, you know, Paul, it's a little too harsh. You're a little too angry. Can you take it down a little bit? Now, you've heard stories about this, John, where actors will go all puff up and say, I'll do this part the way I want to, blah, 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 blah.
Yep.
And I looked at him and I said, well, of course, Mr. Petersen, I'm here for you. I'll take it down. So I took it down a notch and played the scene, let a little charm creep in there. And when it was all said and done, Henry Fonda came over to me and said, that's one of the most professional things I've ever seen.
Oh.
Now, that is no small compliment coming from Henry Fonda.
That's for sure.
And I think of all the compliments, that's the one that kind of let me know that I belonged there, that I had a grasp on the task, and I tried to maintain that with cast and crew, no matter where I was. I loved working with Barbara Stanwyck. She was, well, Barbara Stanwyck.
So strong.
And doing a scene with her was extraordinary. A part of me was saying, God, she's a little person. She's not very big at all. But tough. Meeting Bette Davis, who before I could say anything was aware of my work.
Really?
What a shock. Young man, when I need you, you will take care of me. I mean, that was Bette Davis. There we were.
Wait, how did you meet Bette Davis?
Well, now, you know, John, I owned a limousine company, and I had some pretty neat clients. I didn't have a listed phone number, and my client list was pretty exclusive. And I took care of the Tonight Show for many years. And I met her, picking her up to take her to the Tonight Show.
Wow.
And what a remarkable meeting. Because she had genuine Hollywood stories.
Oh, yeah.
Stories that'll curl your hair. Now, I made it, it's important for me to say this because people say, where are all these stories? And I never tell limousine stories because it's private.
Sure.
And I mean, you'd have to be pretty much a murderer for me to open my mouth. Because there is bad behavior in Hollywood at every level.
Sure.
And why? Because human beings are involved.
Mm-hmm.
Human beings are not perfect.
No.
Even to this day, John, when I work with the collection of former kid stars that make up the bulk of a minor consideration, I am reminded always that human nature is what it is.
Mm-hmm.
About a third of all the humans who go through life do so pretty well.
Mm-hmm.
They accomplish the things they set out to do. They raise children. They're close to their family. They have professional respect. That's about a third. Then there's another third that have their troubles, but they overcome them and they continue.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's a last third who just don't cope very well.
Yeah.
They have troubles they can't overcome. And no matter how much aid is offered to them or extended to them, they just don't respond. Those are the funerals I hate to go to, because the commitment of a minor consideration is to help, to help, to help, and to do so without judgment, even when the cause is lost.
Is it a minor consideration? Because, you know, some people will be listening going, I'm not sure what he's referencing. A minor consideration, would you mind telling one, how it started, and two, what it covers?
Oh, well, sure. Back in, well, how best? Back in 1977, I wrote a book called Walt, Mickey, and Me,
Mm-hmm.
which was meant to be a funny look at my experience and friendships with the original Mouseketeers from 1955. But as I did the research on the book and talked to all of the mice, it wasn't all fun and games. There were dramatic stories within the troupe. There were dramatic stories within my life.
Mm-hmm.
And I began to see areas of commonality that frankly disturbed me, because these once famous kids had certain patterns in their life. Some were quite dangerous
Can you
and
give an
proved to be
example?
dangerous.
Can you give an
Well,
example?
Rusty Hamer, who was 12 years on the Danny Thomas Show. Funny, successful, good family, funny writing. He was my buddy.
Mm-hmm.
By age 42, he was overweight, angry, had a too close association with guns, and he killed himself at age 42 in DeRidder, Louisiana. And that was my wake-up call. Because when that news was announced, I was in bed on a Sunday morning, and I, out of a dead sleep, sat up and said, that will never happen again. It was a promise, because I felt tap on my shoulder. I felt it.
Wow.
I knew that Rusty was in trouble. I talked to his brother all the time. I knew where he lived. I had the freedom and the resources to go through New Orleans and go see him at least.
Mm-hmm.
This guy I used to run with in Hollywood. And I didn't do it. After that news broke, the first person they called was Jay North, who was Dennis the Menace. And I woke him up out of a sound sleep on a Sunday morning and bluntly shared the news with him that our mutual friend, Rusty Hamer, had killed himself in DeRidder, Louisiana. And there was a long silence. And I said, Jay, that's going to be you unless you let me get you some help. Because Jay was overweight and bitter, and he had access to guns. For goodness sake, John, he had a hit list. People who had hurt him.
Oh my
that
God.
he meant to kill.
Ooh. Was he in Florida?
Well,
was he in Florida at the
no,
time?
no, he was in LA at the time.
Okay.
When I said, let me get you help, he said, finally, okay. Well, now what? This is 1996 or whatever the hell it was, or 1990.
Uh-huh.
The call I made after Jay was to his co-star, Jeannie Russell, Dr. Jeannie Russell, and said, Jeannie, Jay said he'd let us try to help him. He needs therapy. She, of course, knew that. And bit by bit, we pieced together a kind of a intervention for Jay. And he accepted it and followed our advice. And he got into therapy and responded beautifully, because he was at that point surrounded by other former kid stars who got it. We understood. We knew what it felt like for a whole industry to just turn its back on you.
Sad. Yeah, really sad.
You know, it really is. And in my own experience, the reason that I had gotten out of town came about because unannounced, this is 1969, a familiar face showed up at the front door of my house, Mickey Rooney.
Mickey Rooney.
Mickey Rooney himself. Yeah, he and I share a birthday, and I was friends with his kids, Mickey Jr. and Tim. And
Musketeers themselves, right?
well, yes. But he came to talk to me because he'd heard there was trouble in my life, and he was correct. And he sat me down in my own living room, and he said, you have to get out of town, get your education, and find something else to do, Paul, because they're not going to let you work for 25 years. This is 1969. And I said to him, why are you telling me this? Because, he said, it happened to me. Mickey Rooney, at age 19 and 20, was the biggest star in Hollywood. He was the real deal. And then they turned their back on him. And when I explained this to people, I said, just watch his acceptance speech when he got the Emmy for Bill. He held that Emmy like a blade and looked at that audience and said, when I was 19 and 20, I was the biggest star in the world. And when I was 40, you wouldn't give me a job. People wonder why he had the personality of a porcupine. Well, didn't have to explain it to me. Doesn't have to explain it to a third of the 1,000 former kid stars in A Minor Consideration. We get it.
Yeah.
Jeannie Russell had a wonderful expression as we worked on the Young Performers Committee at SAG and AFTRA. She said, it was like waking up one day in the middle of the desert and your tribe has disappeared. That's how alone you feel. The people that used to take you to dinner and couldn't wait to see you, all of a sudden didn't care anymore. They were on with their lives. You were a disposable commodity. And, you know, that circumstance. Can't always be a cute kid. You got to transition into something else. That's what A Minor Consideration does. And no less than our eldest member, Diana Serra Cary. She was a contemporary of Jackie Coogan.
Oh my
They
God.
called her Baby Peggy. Yeah, this is from the 20s. This is silent era. Baby Peggy, Diana Serra Cary, was a gifted writer and wrote a couple of good books I recommend to people. Hollywood's Children in the main. But when Diana Serra Cary became familiar and aware of the work A Minor Consideration, even at the beginning was starting to do, she was our biggest champion. Because what we talked about in the 1990s and the early 2000s was the same as it happened to her. It was such a blunt retraction of affection. It was such a poignant separation from all that you knew, that there was an expression in Hollywood when someone would say, hey, whatever happened to this actor? Whatever happened to that actor? What happened to this singer? The
Right.
expression was, whatever happened to baby Peggy?
Hmm.
Because when her career was over, it was like someone chopped her life off
Yeah, I don't
and
think,
she had to go on.
and for my audience, just to give them a little feedback, Baby Peggy was enormous. I believe she made somewhere around $4 million. I mean, this is back in the, as you said, silent era. So this is an enormous amount of money. But am I correct? She walked away with nothing?
Nothing whatsoever.
Uh,
And understand that the true condition of the young performer is they are owned by their parents.
mm-hmm.
Parents have the right to the income and services of their child. They are property. And in the 30s, Jackie Coogan's mother in court,
Mm-hmm.
after his father was killed in an accident involving a expensive car, she said to the judge, Your Honor, you cannot steal what already belongs to you. She owned the money, not Jackie Coogan, not the 4 million, not all the promises made to him. Well, do you think, well, that's a pretty unique thing to say? Well, that's exactly what Gary Coleman's parents said to the Santa Monica judge. I was in the courtroom.
You were there?
I was there. Oh, 9 straight days, you bet. Because he was one of us also. Your Honor, you cannot steal what already belongs to you. We own the money, not Gary. So I asked my friend, how does a young performer who comes to fame survive all of this?
That's right.
How do you go on to be a successful adult? And I'm talking about Ricky Sorensen. People don't know he was Boy in the Tarzan movies.
Okay, sure.
And Ricky grew up to be a pretty serviceable character actor in Westerns mostly.
Mm-hmm.
And when I asked him that question, Ricky said, Paul, you have to pick your parents with care. Well, it's true. Not everybody gets to have Ron Howard's parents, Rance and Gene.
No.
Who were huge supporters of a minor consideration.
I can understand why, because they were great parents.
Well, right. And they lived within their means. They never moved the family home. Ron and Clint had their neighborhood chums, classmates.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
And when there was a threat to not go to college, it was Rance who said, young man, to Ron, you've been promising people since you were 3 years old that you were working so you could go to college. So you will, by God, go to college.
I love it.
That's what it takes.
Yep. Oh, I see it.
Yeah. Lonnie Burr, who was one of the more intelligent of the original Mouseketeers, when I asked him the same question, I asked all of them the same question. Mm-hmm. He said something that struck home to me because I knew he was telling a great truth. Just seeing a kid in show business tells you all you need to know about the parents. It is an unnatural act for a family to take their identity from the labor of a child, to risk education, mental balance, to put all of that at risk for what? Mm-hmm. To play a part in a make-believe world? That's a big risk.
It is.
My dad, who was not the deepest thinker on earth, even though he was an engineer at Lockheed, he said, Paul, I loved it when I could introduce you as my son, but I hated it when I was introduced as your father. Oh, boy. That's the difference.
Did you, by the way, yourself experience any kind of, financial exploitation or anything like that? Or were you
I was
fortunate?
much tougher than that. No, no. I'll tell this story. You will appreciate this, John.
Sure.
When I was 14, I got my first notice of audit from the Internal Revenue Service. And because the Internal Revenue Service has no respect for your age, you were
Yeah.
a taxpayer, right? And my dad and I had to go to an audit interview, which was above the old Hollywood post office. And we walked in, and my dad was a little uncomfortable doing this. He had my records in a shoebox, And the examiner looked across the desk at my father and said, "Mr. Petersen, don't you think you should be taking your son's income seriously?" It stayed with me to this day. And from that following Thursday, I picked up my own check every Thursday and marched it kitty corner to the Bank of America at Sunset and Gower.
Yeah.
And deposited it in my checking account that Grandpa Burr helped me open. And I paid attention. No one beat me up. No one stole my money.
I
When
love it.
things went wrong in my life, I was the author of my fate. I was not some helpless victim. I knew plenty of them, believe me.
Sure.
Mimi Gibson, who was in Houseboat with me,
Yeah.
she tells the story. She woke up one day at age 18 and realized, excuse me,
Mhm.
she was the only person working in her family.
Oh, come on.
No, true. This is a gal who, starred in biblical epics,
Mhm.
10 Commandments, who was in Houseboat with me.
Oh,
That's how she described that sudden realization that the person doing the work had nothing. And what did Mimi do? She's a tough little gal, let me tell you. She gathered up her things and left her home to strike out on her own.
oh my gosh.
It takes that kind of courage. Now, if you're lucky, like Dr. Jeannie Russell,
Mhm.
Jeannie at age 18, with a good career behind her. I mean, playing Margaret was no easy task. It was a difficult thing because Margaret was kind of abrasive,
Yeah. Yeah.
But when she realized, as she looked around the world of ingenues in Hollywood, that she didn't grow up to be Yvette Mimieux. She
Mhm.
wasn't Charlie's Angel material. And she wasn't like Rose Marie with a wicked sense of humor, or Vicki Lawrence, or
Right.
Lucille Ball. She was just kind of ordinary. And she shared her misgivings at this career that had been thrust upon her. And her mother went to the other room and brought in a bank passport, a savings account. She had saved Jeannie's money,
Oh,
and she opened that passbook and said, "This is what you have left. This is what we saved for you. So you decide what you want to be." Well,
that's
Jeannie had the resources to
oh,
become a rather prominent chiropractor. She did it because money was saved for her, money
that,
she earned.
I love it. I love hearing that the good stories as
Yeah,
well.
the good stories are sometimes the kids have wonderful parents, very supportive,
Sure.
and sometimes, I won't name her name, God gave them a spine of steel that they understand entirely what has befallen them.
Mm.
I remember getting a call when we were doing our first ever survey from Brooke Shields in New York, who wouldn't identify herself. And I'm sitting on the phone going, well, I know who the hell you are. Let's not play games here. Brooke had to come to that decision too, because her mom was a piece of work.
Yes, she was.
And she was not alone in that. We worked with the kid, Charlie Herbert Saperstein, who was in a little movie called The Fly.
Oh,
13 Steps. I mean, quality young actor. He was my little brother in Houseboat, along with Mimi Gibson.
yeah.
And when Charlie got in trouble in his job up in Las Vegas, and he needed help, I only made one call. It was to Mimi Gibson. And Mimi and her husband and I and my wife, we traveled to Las Vegas to do an old-fashioned intervention, a serious, got you by the throat intervention.
Yeah.
Buddy, you're a drug addict, and it's going to kill you. And Charlie, with the support of his fellow child actors, responded positively and was content living in a halfway house before he died. He had gotten his life in order. John, sometimes we look around, particularly with my wife, who's a show business nurse, as I think you know. She ran the medical department at CBS Radford Studios, so she's really familiar with the business.
Sure.
We shake our heads sometimes because the signs are often so obvious. Is your driver's license current? Have you paid your insurance bill? Are you behind on your rent?
Yep.
Do you still talk to your brothers and sisters? What is your relationship with your parents? They seem like little things, but they're not little. When a life is well ordered, those things are taken care of. Because you were raised and trained to take care of them. Exactly.
Let's you know what, I want to make sure that I don't, which, by the way, I mean, all of this, it is just, first of all, before I move on, I got to tell you, minor consideration. By the way, can you give so I don't forget, what is the website?
Well, it's a minor consideration, and minor is MINOR consideration.org.
.org. Okay.
You're right. We're a 501c3 tax deductible foundation. These days, because I'm pretty much computer illiterate, people can always reach me through Facebook. My phone number is always listed, always has been. In fact, it used to drive Screen Actors Guild switchboard crazy. What do you mean we can give out your number? You give out my number because I'm a real person, and if people need help, they have to be able to reach me. Give them my number.
Oh my gosh.
Well, don't you want us to give it to your manager? I don't have a manager. I barely had an agent. I'm not hiding from anybody.
Right.
And I can't do good if people can't reach me.
Yeah.
And this is a commitment in this house. We're trying to help. And we're trying to help in a little area of the world that has been too long neglected.
Yeah.
John, you realize the stories I'm telling, or I have shared with you, are 100 years ago.
I know.
Serra Cary was a star in the 1920s. Jackie Coogan, for whom the law is named, was in the 1920s. Why haven't we fixed this?
Right. By the way, let me ask you about the Coogan law. Now, I know that the Coogan law is set up. My son did a little. I'm an actor. That's my background. But my son also, he did a little bit, and then we just like you said, we like pulled him. He was really young.
Yeah.
But he wanted to do it. But anyway, and no, we didn't take any of his money. But the Coogan law, my understanding is, 10% of it goes into an account that he can access once he's 18. How do you honestly feel about that? Because to me, I remember thinking 10%. I mean, come on, that leaves 90% of, that parents can just use. It's terrible.
John, you didn't really read the back of your child's paycheck. Your first and largest partner is the federal government. Young performers are taxed because of their high dollar incomes at the maximum rate. So we're talking 35% goes to the feds. If you're in California, another 13% goes to the state. If you're a professional actor, by law, you have an agent. That's another 10%.
That's right.
You see where I'm going with this?
Yeah.
That's why the Coogan law calls for 15% to be set aside as the property of their child. But just think how imperfect the Coogan law was back in the 30s. It was only for kids with long-term contracts.
Come on.
If you were signed to MGM, you had money saved. If you were lucky like me and you were on a long-running television series, you had money set aside, held by the Superior Court in LA. But what about the kids who did commercials or worked for 3 weeks on a movie or guest starred on a television show? Nothing was saved for them.
Terrible.
So a whole bunch of former kid stars got together and made the point, first in public on shows like Sally Jesse Raphael and other talk shows. Here's reality, folks. Do you really think it's fair that Brandon Cruz, from the courtship of Eddie's father, was dimed by the Treasury Department of the United States for taxes that were not paid by his mother? You think that's fair to do to a 6-year-old child? And to pursue him into his 30s over a tax debt? I have been in meetings with Treasury Department officials who run the IRS, and they're in tears because they did that. They did it to Brandon and others, countless others, held them responsible as babes for the misbehavior of agents and managers and parents and employers and co-stars.
That's terrible.
That's why, John, that's why we do the work we do.
Yeah.
This is so wrong. And I make this point, and the person who makes this point most eloquently is Johnny Provost from Lassie.
Yeah, I've had him on. Wonderful guy.
With our first presentations, you familiar with like Egyptian scrolls, how they wrote all their laws, right? Johnny, in helping people understand how upside down show business can be, would stand at the lectern with a scroll and he would turn it loose and let it roll out down past the podium onto the floor. And he would say, "Those are the rules for animals. Those are the American Humane Association rules, 90 pages of rules for spiders and goats and rats." You know how many paragraphs there are in the Screen Actors Guild after basic agreement? 3 paragraphs about special nature of children. Why did we let this happen?
Yeah.
Well, on the industry's behalf, I can tell you why. Because every 5 years, the landscape of children changes. 20% dropout per year among professional young performers. 20% per year. In 5 years, they're almost all gone.
Oh, man.
Not a lot of lucky old goats like Tony Dow and Stan Livingston and me or Shelley Fabares that
Yeah.
outlast the rules.
Wow. Did tell me this, by the way, because you brought her up and I just went, oh my gosh, I can't believe it. You and I got talking so much. What about Shelley? What, I do need to go back. We talked all about the Donna Reed Show to everybody. And then I'm like, we never even talked about Shelley. By the way, what was the first time you met Shelley? Because I know you're very close. When was the very first time you met?
We had actually been cast as brother and sisters for the Sherry Lewis show the year before Donna Reed.
Oh. We
were just a natural brother and sister act. I was always Shelley's pesky younger brother. We scrap like real brothers and sisters. And remember, I had a real older sister at home.
Right.
So I really got doubled up, so to speak. Shelley has had one of the most remarkable careers imaginable. Only Betty White has worked longer.
Yeah.
Shelley was in like 4 different long-running series, in addition to some funny ones like Fernwood Tonight. But she did projects like Brian's Song, the Brian Keith series, for goodness sake, One Day at a Time. She's one of the most gifted actresses, comedic actresses there is.
Yeah, I agree.
In addition to, she's the only actress who did 3 movies with Elvis.
Oh, wow.
And she never tells stories out of school.
Did you
learn that? Huh?
Did you meet him?
At her insistence. I wasn't properly respectful of his talent. And she was doing a picture with him, and she said, "You will come to the studio tomorrow." And I did. And I said hello. I had met him before. We run into each other in clubs, and our J.C. Bring cut our hair, so we were at the shop. And I was standing there next to the camera, and he was getting prepared to sing a song. And the click track started, and he started to sing, John. And it's like a light bulb went off when I realized how really extraordinary Elvis Presley was.
Wow.
And when the song was over, Shelley came over to me and said, "Well, what do you say now, little brother?" Because she was right. She was dead right. I had not accorded him the respect for that awesome God-given talent. It was right there to see.
Was he, you were saying about getting your hair cut too. What was, I'm sorry, it's just so funny picturing you getting your hair cut there and there's Elvis. What is that like to, was he a regular guy or?
No, it was the life of working actors, working performers. J.C. Bring was a regular guy. Elvis was a regular guy who loved football and cars. I drove up to J.C. Bring's office there on Fairfax in my Cobra, for God's sake.
Oh.
People say, "Well, what was your first car?" "Well, it was a 57 Chevy or 51 Merc." My car was a Cobra.
Oh, what a car.
I was the president and founder of the Cobra Owners Association. I started that. But it all took, what I cared about was that I was worthy of the attention being paid to me for the good fortune of owning such a fantastic vehicle.
Wow.
I didn't want to embarrass myself. I wanted Ken Miles and Carol Shelby and Dan Gurney to know me and that I was appreciative.
I was just curious, did Elvis have a car as well that was kind of like in that zone?
Well, of course, he had several. I'll tell you a little story about Elvis, and I got this from my friend Susan Graham, who did a documentary on Elvis about his incredible generosity. In the course of his life,
Mm-hmm.
Elvis gave away 200 Cadillacs,
Oh my gosh.
gave them to people, nurses, gardeners,
Mm.
buddies from playing football, other performers. This is with a celebrity from whom Colonel Parker took half
Oh yeah.
of his income.
Yeah, that was his contract. Yep.
Not a nice person.
No.
But Elvis, there are three people that worked with Elvis very closely: Jerry and Shelley Fabares and Anne Margaret.
Mm-hmm.
I'll tell you one thing they all have in common: they never tell stories out of school,
Mm-hmm.
ever. In my life, as a genuine bubblegum star with hit records and
Yeah.
fast cars and faster women, Donna Reed came to me as I was about 17. And I had my own home in Beverly Hills and a pretty steady job. Donna said to me, "You can get away with anything in Hollywood if you're discreet. I don't want to read about you."
Mm. Wow. That says it all.
Lesson took. Well, of course it does. Of
Yeah.
course it does.
Wow.
There are dark secrets in every walk of life
Mm-hmm. There is.
and in every profession. Sometimes it's almost too easy when great talent is involved to excuse the mistakes human beings make uh, in pursuit of that talent. That's wrong.
Right.
Talent is a gift. This is something. This comes from God,
Oh yeah.
and if you abuse it and aren't properly respectful, you will have trouble in your life.
Oh yeah.
The now go ahead.
No, I don't want to cut you off.
I get on this soapbox all the
It's
time.
okay. I
I'm
was
looking. I
curious.
hope so.
I wanted.
I'm looking up at my clock here. It's so important for people to understand they are not. You should not be in awe of people and think that it's all they're doing.
Mhm.
We are each of us the product of so many influences: our health, the circumstances into which we are born, the parts that we win in competitive auditions. All of that is, nobody could figure all of that out.
No.
I talked to Jackie Cooper once when I was writing Walt, Mickey, and Me, and asked him, "How do you judge kid stars, young performers? Number one, what's the composition of their family? Is it an intact family, mom and dad, maybe 3 or 4 brothers and sisters? What is the nature of their work? Do they have a Linda Evans part in The Exorcist, or Patty McCormick's part in The Bad Seed?
Mm-hmm.
Or do they have Judy Garland's role in The Wizard of Oz?" And then he said, I asked, "How old were they when their careers came to an end?"
Mm.
It's a difference. If it happens to you when you're like Mimi Gibson, 16, 17 years old, that's one thing. If it happens when you're 26 or 30, that's another thing.
Mm-hmm.
If you come to that dead end when you're 42, like Rusty Hamer
Yeah.
or Trent Lehman or Tim Hovey or so many others I could name, that is another kettle of fish entirely. But the pattern is there.
Mm-hmm.
And no less than Jackie Cooper, who knew a thing or two,
No, sure he did.
about young celebrity. That's what he was able to share with us. I asked him, how did you and Alan handle your friendship with Bobby Driscoll, a certified Disney child star?
Mhm.
And he's with a sense of melancholy said to me, Paul, it was sad with Bobby because he was not a nice person. He was undersized, had terrible acne, and thought the world owed him a living.
Mm.
And he was a drug addict, a heroin addict,
Mm.
and died alone and was buried in Potter's Field.
Oh, very sad.
Alan Rafkin and Jackie Cooper knew him. Well, I've known people like that myself.
Yeah.
And sometimes you just have to shrug your shoulders and recognize that, but for the grace of God, could have been me.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Could be for all of us. Now, John, I'm running out of steam here.
I
If you
understand.
don't mind, I hate to say this, but I really do need to take a break. We can continue it another time. I hope all of this goes together for you well.
Well, I'll go in and I always take a look at it and I, kind of figure out, but no, it's all so interesting. You're just one of those guys I could talk to for hours because I love that time period. I love who we're talking about. We didn't even get to the Mickey Mouse Club, your singing career, working with Jimmy Cohn. I mean, so many things. So yeah, I would love that if we could come back and maybe talk about some of that.
Well, before I go, I will tell you a little later this month, the Hollywood Cowboys, the Silver Spur Awards,
Mm-hmm.
they've decided to call me in. They want to give me some little trophy or something. And just between you and me, I know why. It's because every Western I was ever in, I died. And I died wonderfully. I was a good dyer. I have a friend, Beverly Washburn, famous for being the best young crier in Hollywood. In Westerns, if I put on a gun or got on a horse, you could bet I was going to be dead. So with that, I'll say thank you, John, for taking the time to talk with me.
You got it. It was total pleasure. Loved it.
Great.
And I look forward to the next time.
Okay. Thanks, John. Take care.
Thanks a bunch. Bye. Well, thanks for listening, and definitely hit the subscription button. As well, hit the notification bell so that you'll know when my next episode is released. In addition, check out some of my other interviews if you haven't had a chance. Eric Roberts, Henry Winkler, Jerry Mathers from Leave It to Beaver. There's so many. Enjoy.